Hi, I'm Kathy from Stitch It Together. Today I am going to be loading a quilt onto my frame. I have a new camera. I thought maybe this would be a good way for me to test it out and for you to see how things get loaded here at Stitch It Together. I always start with my backing first, and I do use Renae's red snappers. If you have not used them, they are a system that has small clips to start with, and then bigger clips as you go. And that's what I'm going to be using to load my quilt. My quilt is directional, and so it's not square, so it does matter which direction it's facing. I have a pieced backing. It's Frankenstein backing, so I really don't care the direction so long as it's the right direction for the quilt. But mine is oriented the correct way. I do have an idler rail. As you see, this is the idler rail, and these are my leaders. And I am not one that centers my quilts. I don't do that. There's a lot of reasons that I don't center my quilts. One of them is that I want even wear on my machine and on my belts and on my leaders, as your leaders, in fact, do stretch out too. And so I don't really pay attention to where I'm starting my quilt because I have measuring tapes on the idler rail and that I use across the belly bar. All I'm trying to do is get more even wear out of my quilt. So what I'm doing right now is using the small clips to just keep the backing from dragging, pulling down while I'm trying to set it all up. And I am just loosely using the small clips to do the ends. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to be using the bigger clips, and I'll have to use several of them to finish clipping the edge of the backing to the top leader. Your leader should go underneath, if you have the idler rail, your leader should go underneath the idler rail. I'm just loosely without trying to pull, lining up the edge of my backing with the channel, the seam that I used for the Renae's red snappers. By coincidence and by accident, if you will, I used in red threads. I used just what was in my machine, which turned out to be a good thing because that allowed me to have a very visible straight line to try and line up my backing when I'm using the snappers. So if you have not done that and you're getting them, I would recommend when you do your channel, use a brightly colored thread so that you can see it. That will be a big help to you. I am someone that bastes my entire quilt before I go. When I mean baste the entire quilt, I mean top to bottom. Not everyone loads their quilt the same way that I do, and there is no right or wrong way. You should try a variety of different ways and find what works best for you. Just because this works for me doesn't mean it would work for you. It does take more time to get going, I will say, at the start, but by basting the whole thing first, I can look for any mistakes or boo-boos that are in my quilt for starters. And but also if there are uneven areas, I can find them in advance. If there are seams, that maybe have come undone, I'm going to find those before I've quilted. And then I even have the option of even picking it off the frame if need be, fix something. So that's one of the reasons that I really do like to, just one of many reasons I like to base my quilt first. Okay, so I've got my top edge going on the Renae snappers. I am just going to loosely roll it, and notice that it is the right side is facing down because this is my backing fabric. And I'm not going to care too much about what it looks like on this top rail. I'm just trying to get it on the top rail so I can roll it evenly onto the bottom rail, the belly bar actually. So I am going to now get my little starter clips, and because I have the measuring tape on my idler rail, I can see about where I'm expecting to be. And I also have a measuring tape that I bring across the belly bar. That's my idler rail, my belly bar. I can look to see that I'm placing my fabric at about the right spot. And my starter section is only so it's not pulling away from me or dropping down while I am trying to get it on the leader here. So with those on, I'm just going to repeat the same thing. I'm lining up the edge of my batting here, my backing here, and I am just snapping these on. I'm trying very hard not to pull on my fabric. Once you get used to the red snappers, you'll find that they're infinitely faster than actually it's a bit right there, pinning, and less blood involved. I have neuropathy in my hands, and even with the neuropathy, I'm able to use these red snappers pretty successfully. If you have a problem with them being tight when you first get them, you can use a hot hair dryer to kind of expand them a little bit and soften them up a little bit. That has been very helpful for me, but for the most part, especially when they went to the smaller size, they used to come in very long sections. When Renae's red snappers went to Amazon, they started making them in smaller sizes here, and I just find that I didn't have that problem once they were smaller. When I see smaller sizes, the outside edge of these used to be probably 6 feet long instead of in probably these are probably 18-inch sections. They were the same thing. They were just longer rails all at once. Okay, now that I have my backing onto both the top and the belly bar, I'm going to roll it. And now I am very concerned. I'm going to take my measuring tape off. Now I am very concerned and very aware is if it's stacking and for wrinkles. The purpose of putting it on the top bar was so that while I'm rolling it onto this bar, my belly bar, I have even tension, so nothing is going to be rolling tighter or looser on one side or in the middle. So that's putting it loosely on the top bar. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten just a little bit. And what I'm looking for is like little things like this. So I know that because I have Frankenstein to this backing together, that the tension between the different fabrics, they're not even the same family or the same brand of fabrics, might be a little bit different. So it's even more important that I may have to roll and re-roll, like go backwards and forwards to try and make sure that these are on the rail and I don't get different tension and it's rolling on straight. So that's all I really care about now. If I can get it to stack, if you have your selvages on your left and your right, that would be great. That would be where you should be looking for it to stack. And by stack, I mean that it would stack on top of each other like coins when they're all gathered up together. But if you have a piece backing like I do, or your selvages are not on the sides, it may or may not stack. It will depend on how straight you have sewn your pieces together or how straight your backing is. So all I'm doing is I'm rolling a little bit, making sure I don't have any wrinkles, looking to see if my fabric is straight. And I will back roll just a little bit to see if I can increase the tension a little bit so I can get out any wrinkles. And then I will roll forward again, just a little at a time. Now, when I get to the top, I'm going to bring it forward till about the middle of my frame because I am going to be putting the batting on next and basting it down. And I want that to be a comfortable distance from me so I can sew it and not have to stretch so far. So I'm going to do a very heavyweight batting. Some have scrim. If you have a scrim, usually the scrim goes down to the downside. My machines don't seem to really care. I'm using the filter stream today. It's at the very high loft. So let's see. My machine seems to do just fine with all of the battings. I don't usually have any issues at all. Even if I have made a mistake and put the scrim side the wrong way, I don't generally have issues with that. All right. So I am going to now use my QCT to baste a straight line across the batting. While I'm waiting for that to get going, I'm also going to put my batting in between the rails. Particularly with the cotton and poly mixed battings, it's really thick. You do need to be careful. Here I am just kicking it. You do need to be careful when you're rolling your quilts because it is very sticky. So you can have an issue where it's sticking, first of all, and pulling someplace apart. And so it can shred a little bit, but you can also, it likes to kind of move in. So when you're going to be rolling your quilts, just be sure to always reach underneath and pull on each side. Good idea where it's supposed to be. It should always be bigger than your quilt top, of course. But you definitely want to make sure that it's not pulling in like this or you'll have wrinkles at the end of your quilt. All right. I am loading QCT. When it moves diagonally at the beginning, I know that my belts are engaged, so that's always a good thing. I'm going to use select and sew. And I'm going to show the save area, which is bigger than my quilt top. And usually you can do just where your backing is, because I use the Renae's red snappers, kind of have to go outside a little bit to get it where I want in that left-hand side. You pull it all the way down to your belly bar. There's my bottom right. Now I'm picking a line. Horizontal line is not part of your patterns that it comes with, but it's very easy to draw, or you can often find one on the Brace site for QCT. So what I'm going to do now is I need to know how wide my backing is. 25. So I'm going to say that is 100. Yeah, that's 75. I'm just going to do 75. I need to know what the width is so I can set this. To make my line, I'm going to be putting on a 1-point placement. Why 1 point? So even though it's a line, it'll have 2 points. Whole purpose of me doing a straight line in QCT is to have a straight line. If I had to have 2 points, I don't know, even if I drew them in advance, I wouldn't know that by the time it's on my frame that it's actually a straight line. It could be up or down, or it wouldn't necessarily be straight. So by using a 1-point placement, it's going to QCT is going to show me where it says a straight line is. In order to do that, you need to put line select and sew. You pick 1-point placement. You're going to unlock your ratio lock. That's a little lock that's on your settings. And I'm going to, for the width, I'm going to put it what the width is. I'm going to just go ahead and say 75. And for your height, you need to make it the smallest. Otherwise, it's not going to make a line that's this fat. You're not going to be able to place it as successfully if you don't change that width. So the smallest you can put it is at 1/4 of an inch. And so that's what I do. I'm going to now hold my bobbin. And you can put your side clamps on if you want. I'm just going to hold mine since I'm going to be moving it so often. And now I'm going to place this pattern right where I put my, pull my bobbin. And that looks good to me. I'm going to hit quilt. I am going to now go to my settings. I am going to put it on very 7 stitches per inch just because this is more like basting. And I want to put it on slow because I am using a very heavy batting and I want to be able to stop the machine if something happens. So I'm going to say okay, and then I'm going to just hit set. But let's say I'm using the sprinkle I put, and this seems to be doing all the batting quite well. So you can wear the regular piece, and you're using a very heavy batting like this without the fabric on top of it, all of these little spiritual that we kind of gave you to me. So it appears that I have run out of bobbin. And so this sometimes happens. So I'm going to turn the camera off and I'm going to put a new bobbin in and I'm going to do this again. So I just did the stitch all over again. So I'm back right where I was. Next, what I'm going to do is be placing on my quilt top. My quilt top is directional, so I want to be certain that I am doing the side that I want to start with. And let's see, it's right here. So now what I'm going to want to do is line up the raw edge of my quilt with the line that I just sewed. And I know that it's a straight line because QCT made it a straight line. Okay. I'm going to give myself a little slack here, right up here on top, so that I can maneuver my quilt top while I'm basting it down. And when I am satisfied with the placement here, I will use my machine to baste this down. Now these are basting stitches, and they come out very easily. I've never had an issue with stitches that didn't want to come out unless they're not basting stitches. Okay, I like to go in this direction. I'm just going to eyeball about 1/4 inch. So have to be out of your quilting interface screen to use your machine controls. So that's what I just did there. Okay. So I pulled my bobbin. Do pull your bobbin. If you don't know how to do that, you really should learn. Make sure I'm in basting mode. On the base mode. Okay. So with baste mode, when I move, it moves. When I stop, it stops. So I can stop or slow down or whatever I want to do and make sure that the edge is right where I want it to be. I can stop it. I can leave my needle down, whatever I want to do, and make any adjustments, because as you're quilting, it will kind of have a tendency to want to push your fabric this way. So you may need to readjust your fabric as you're going along. And just stop. Remember, they're basting stitches. You can take them out. If it starts to go off, you can undo it and you can just start again. You'll probably have to reposition more when you have a thick batting than you have a thin batting. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to roll my quilt so it's closer to the idler rail. I do not float my quilt tops, and so I am going to attach the top to the lowest bar. So let me show you how I do that. So I'm running my machine. I had actually left my needle in there. Some people don't like to do that. As long as I'm gentle, I'm fine with that. So now what I'm looking for is I'm looking at the lines, the measuring tape, not just on the top, but I'm going to put this one on that goes across my belly bar. Make sure it's on top of my fabric and not wrapped up from the inside. And I'm looking to see where my quilt is falling on the measuring tape. And this one looks like it's about 21 and a quarter. And I want to see, is my quilt falling there at right here, closer to the belly bar? It is now. And I'm going to do the same thing for the other side. There we go. And I'm happy with where it's at. I am going to now just quilt all the way down. My machine, my frame is quite thin. So I will quilt across the middle and then across the belly bar. Let me show you what I mean. I've quilted down just a few inches in my belly bar. My machine can probably go to about to here, but I am going to go now across my frame. And I guess this is why I don't worry about whether I'm going up or down when I'm basting. Some people will only baste in the upward direction when they're doing their quilts. I don't tend to do that. I go in both directions, and I feel like that works for me, and that's why I'll do that. Now, all the stitches that go across that are horizontal will get taken out as I quilt. Why? Well, the big stitches, you could, in your haste to try and pull them out, you could pull out the real stitching pretty easily. So you should take that out as before you quilt. And now I'm going to go back up. And I'm going to come down. Okay. I'm going to, and I could have done this before, but I could already see that my bottom, my backing tension was just fine before I got started. But if your tension for your backing was not good, you should have adjusted that first. Mine was. So I'm just making sure that everything is straight. Because as I had said, that when you're using this really sticky batting, you want to be sure that it has not pulled in. So before I do this next horizontal seam, I'm going to absolutely make sure that my batting is not rolled in any way, and it has not. So I'm going to go ahead and do my first belly bar across here. Continue up. So what's interesting is I have moved my room recently to clean underneath of it. It has so much stuff underneath there, fuzz and stuff. I moved the frame because it's on wheels. And I'm noticing now that there are a couple places where it was skipping stitches, which means it's only in this direction, which means it's an encoder issue. I will probably have to go in, and I won't do it on camera, and tighten up that encoder, the one that is on the back side of the machine, not the one that goes this way, but this way, that way, before I quilt. Another good reason to base your quilt is you can find out if there's anything like that, encoder issues, before you actually start quilting when you're basting, when it doesn't really matter. So now what I'm going to do is as I said, I do not float my quilts. So what I want to do is I want to bring the edge of my quilt up, the other bottom edge up. And I want to get it even in the same position so that my raw edges are even with what I've already basted down. And this is a good time to be able to find out. Again, this is very informative when you are basting your project in advance. This is your top and your bottom borders or edges might not actually be the same width. You know, we're perfectly imperfect quilts, and sometimes they're not. And this would be where you would be able to determine, hey, my quilt is not really the same width at the top and the bottom. I may need to make some adjustments, and that's good information to have before you're quilting. So now that I have done that, I'm just going to unlock my quilt here. That's off. I'm pulling my needle forward and up. And just like before, I'm going to use those fur slips. I'm just going to pin it. Not pin it, clip it right where it's supposed to be. And now I'll use the big clips to finish the job. Again, you might decide that this is a lot of work for you and that you want to float your quilts. The frame that I have, the Quilter's Evolution frame, is actually built, I think, more with floating your tops in mind. But I don't like to do that. I like to have more control over whether my edge is straight when I reach the bottom. I guess you only have to have one or two bad experiences, or or four or five or six, where you came to the end of the quilt and it was just a mess. But you say, yeah, I think I would rather baste my quilt and not have that problem. Okay, that's good enough. So now I'm going to roll it back onto the bottom rail. And when I'm doing that, I have batting rail. And so I have batting on my actual rail here. And what I find that helps, particularly with a batting like this, is I'm going to now, of course, you're not going to see me because I'm going to go underneath the machine. I'm going to push my batting over the top of that, of the batting rolls that I have, so that it's not going to catch on my top. But this is something that you should be very careful of when you start rolling it up, is that you're not pulling on your batting. It can be very sticky, and then you can be rolling your top onto this rail, and it can catch, and you don't even know it, and it can damage your batting. So when it's going onto this rail, I don't even really care if it's straight. I really just don't. It can, so long as it's not on the floor, that's what I care about. And so long as I know when I reach the end, that it's going to be straight, that's really all I care about. So I'm not concerned about the top until it reaches my belly bar, right up here where I'm going to be quilting. So I just don't want it to be on the floor. I don't want it to be pulling on my batting. But I do want it to be attached so that I'm sure when I get to the end of it, it is actually straight. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and roll my quilt, starting to roll it onto the take-up rail. And I don't care if my basting exactly touches. I don't care for that. And it just has to be close enough. So I can already see that my batting is starting to pull in. So I'm going to take care of that right away. There we go. All right. And now what I am going to do is I'm going to set my side planks. I didn't do that first roll. I could have, that I was moving things around so quickly, but I find that holding the side works better. While I'm on the side, what I'm going to do is I want to adjust my back tension first. So I'm looking at my backing, and that is probably right. Well, what is right? There are a lot of answers to that question. I know when I first started quilting, I thought tighter was better. That is actually not the truth. In fact, tighter is not better. Tighter creates a whole lot more vibration, and it creates drunk stitches, which is when your machine is going straight, but your stitches kind of look like they're not straight when they should be. Those are drunk stitches, and they can be caused by all the vibration of the fabric, and your needle is trying to go in straight, but it can't because your fabric is vibrating and moving. So I want to ideally be able to put my finger underneath the quilt, and when I push up, I want to be able to reach my second or my third knuckle. And another way of saying that is you really only want it as tight as necessary so that it doesn't drag on the bed of your machine. That's really as tight as you need it to be. You don't want to be bending your bars. If you can see a warp in your rails, your quilt is definitely too tight. So again, I am adjusting my backing first. And now I'm going to make sure that everything is straight. I'm going to look at my measuring tape and see if everything is where it's supposed to be. And I am not going to lock this bottom rail where my top is on. I'm just not going to lock it. That allows me to be able to move things and for it to be flexible. So that I do want there to be locked in this quilt. So if it needs to draw in, it has the freedom to do that. Okay. All right. Once I'm happy with it, I'm going to put the side clamps on this side. And you don't want your tension too tight on your side clamps either, just so you know. The same principle is that you only want it tight enough so that it does not pull when your machine starts to go. You don't want it to be pulling. So now what I'm going to do, I am just going to baste. It's like I did before. I'm going to go about halfway. I'm going to baste across my middle, halfway point. I like to lock my stitches, just kind of go back and forth when I change directions. But I will always take out my horizontal stitching, the stitching that goes this way, but I don't always take out the stitching on the left hand, right hand edges. And usually that is a 1/4 inch away. And I just find well, kind of helps me when I'm binding later on anyway. I can take it out, but I don't often, I don't always. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll my quilt. But I'm going to now turn the recording off until I get to the end of my quilt because there's really no point for you to see me repeatedly doing that. Okay, I'm back and I have reached the end of my quilt. Let me show you some of the things that I do when I do that. So I am not going to go all the way down to the Renae's red snapper. I want to leave a couple of inches. The reason is, particularly with a really high loft batting, I know that there's going to be draw in. And while I want my edge to be controlled for sure, so that I know I have a straight edge to work with when I get to the end of the quilt. So know that as I release those stitches as we go up, there's going to be draw in, and that way I'm assured that if it needs to come up, it still can. I don't want it to be where it's putting wrinkles in the backing of the fabric because it's drawn in so much that there's nowhere else to go. So I don't want to go all the way down to the end. And so let me just do that. Bobbin. This quilt is about, I'm going to say, when I measured is 84 long and I think I could it was 72, 71 to 72 wide. And that makes it about a twin size quilt. And it has a very heavy kind of loft to it. I am going to lose an awful lot of quilting space by the time I reach the end of my quilt. And if you had a king size quilt, you would use even more than that. So another thing that is a benefit to basting your quilt ahead of time is that I can measure how much quilt space I have left when I get to the end of my quilt. So that's something that even when I don't think, like in this quilt, I don't think I'm going to be doing pantograph with this quilt. I think I'm going to be doing borders and corners, and I think I'm going to be doing some custom quilting. But I could change my mind, but I'm always in the habit now of making certain that I measure that distance so that I would know how much throat space I have at the end of my quilt. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can do that. If you have a unique 21X, you can use it in QCT, or you can use it actually on your sewing machine. So what I want to do is I want to measure how much throat space I have left. In order to do that, I need to release my belly bar just a little bit, come back a little bit, so that I have that whole space. I go to past where my throat space would be. So now I want to be comfortably, so I'm not pulling really hard where all that batting is. I want to be comfortable right here. I'm going to go to my toolbox. I'm going to find the measure. I'm going to say reset origin. I'm going to move this up to where it's comfortable right here. And then my measurement is right there. It says 14.05 inches. So comfortably 14 inches, probably less than that. I'd probably stick with, I wouldn't want to give myself more than 13.5 inches. So I will write that down someplace so that I know that's how much space I really have to work with. So that's one of the other benefits of doing this. And now let me show you what happens next. So now I'm going to take off these Renae's red snappers on the bottom, not on it's for the top, but not for the backing, just for the top. So what that does for me now is a couple of things. First of all, I don't need this leader anymore. And now I have access underneath my machine to check my stitches. I have access if I need to change the bobbin, I will be able to do that. The other thing that I can do as well is I can get this excess batting, I can cut it off right now. And that lowers how much stuff I have on the belly bar when I roll it back. And it's also not in my way when I'm quilting because it would still kind of be in my way if I really wanted to have access inside of there. Now that's out of my way. And the last step is to roll it all back. Check this off. Yeah. See? I roll it kind of comfortably under my bar, under my early rail. Not too close and not too far away. I'm going to use all my space. That's how it is. I will take out the basting in this zone right here. before I got going, but that's how I do a quilt. I prepare a quilt, load a quilt on, and stitch it together. So hope that you found this helpful. Again, I'm Kathy from Stitch It Together. Have a great day.